Welcome to Stamps Old World UK, the home of rare stamp discoveries, historical insights, and collector stories from across the globe. In today's deep dive episode, we turn our full attention to one of the most fascinating, and potentially lucrative, stamps in American philatelic history, the 5-cent Theodore Roosevelt stamp, especially when it carries a rare and mysterious D mint mark. This single-letter marking, though small in size and subtle in appearance, has become a point of major interest among collectors and investors alike, and in this long-form video, we'll explore its origins, analyze its market value in the current dollar landscape, explain what makes it so rare, and help you understand why it may just be sitting unnoticed in your album or inherited family stockbook. We'll also guide you step by step on how to assess its condition, what features to look for, and how to make sure you don't undersell or overlook something that could turn out to be worth several hundred, if not thousands, of dollars in today's growing collectible market. Whether you are a seasoned collector, a total beginner, or simply someone who found an old Roosevelt stamp in a dusty drawer, I encourage you to stay with me right to the end because the information in this video might lead you to a hidden fortune. Let's begin by going back in time to understand the origin of this powerful design. The 5-cent Roosevelt stamp was first issued in the early part of the 20th century as part of a commemorative or definitive series intended to honor the 26th President of the United States, Theodore Roosevelt. Known for his bold leadership style, military heroism, environmental conservation, and trust-busting policies, Roosevelt remains a towering figure in American history. The stamp itself reflects this with a stately, formal engraved portrait, showing Roosevelt's sharp-eyed gaze beneath his signature spectacles. Framed within a powerful border of strong lettering and symmetrical design, the stamp is printed in a rich shade of deep blue, making it both beautiful and recognizable to collectors of all levels. For decades, this stamp has circulated in collections, albums, and exhibitions. However, over time, philatelists began to notice subtle variations, some of which included strange markings or letters in tiny areas of the design, including the much-discussed D mint mark. Unlike typical mint marks used in coinage to indicate a specific production location like Denver, in the case of stamps, the term mint mark can refer to subtle overprints, coded initials, or variations applied by printers or local post offices to identify distribution or printing differences. In the Roosevelt 5-cent stamp, the D mint mark is not universally present and is considered quite rare, appearing in only a small number of surviving copies. And this is where things get very interesting for collectors, because a confirmed D mint mark Roosevelt stamp instantly moves from the common category to a high-value collectible. As of 2025, the market for rare and mint-marked stamps has been gaining steam. Auction houses are reporting a renewed interest in American classic stamps with subtle but significant production differences, especially those tied to presidential themes or early 1900s printing techniques. The Roosevelt stamp fits both criteria. Typically, a normal used Roosevelt 5-cent stamp, no mint mark, regular condition, visible cancellation, and average centering, might sell for as little as $2 to $10, depending on condition. Mint and used versions with clear gum and strong centering might earn you around $25 to $40 if sold on platforms like eBay, Delcamp, or Hipstamp. But when that same stamp contains a verified D mint mark, and especially if it's in mint or near mint condition, that number skyrockets. Verified D mint Roosevelt stamps have been known to fetch between $150 and $750 depending on market demand, condition, centering, historical provenance, and certification. A recent auction in California saw one example reach a winning bid of $865 thanks to its sharp centering, full gum, and verification certificate from the Philatelic Foundation. Another private sale in Boston reached $950 for a D mint Roosevelt that had passed through 3 generations of family ownership and remained in pristine condition the entire time. These figures are not just speculation, they are real examples from respected auctions and sales within the past 12 months. And the trend is rising. Experts believe that the D mint variant, once better understood and more widely authenticated, could become one of the most valuable Roosevelt stamps in the world of early U.S. postage. What makes the D mint mark so rare and desirable? The answer lies in both its scarcity and its mystery. There are no official mint records that clearly document every variant of this issue, leading many collectors to believe that the D was applied in a small experimental print run, or perhaps as a control marking used by a regional printer. Others speculate it may have been applied during a local overprint request for a commemorative event or distribution in a smaller district. This lack of clarity actually adds to its desirability. In philately, mystery plus rarity often equals high value, especially when combined with historical significance and strong visual design. But here's the catch, the D mint mark is often hard to spot. It can be hidden within the lines of the frame, subtly placed near the denomination, or even ghosted into the lower margin of the stamp. It's not printed in bold or obvious type. That means you may own one and not even know it. If you've inherited a collection or purchased a bulk lot of early U.S. stamps, it's worth your time to inspect every Roosevelt 5-cent issue under magnification or scanning. Look closely at the corners, lower borders, and shaded areas. In some cases, stamps believed to be regular issues were later authenticated as D mint marks and tripled in value overnight. Let's talk about condition, which is perhaps the single most important factor aside from the mint mark itself. If your Roosevelt stamp has the D mint mark but also has heavy cancellation marks, missing perforations, thins, creases, or stains, its value will still be significantly reduced. Conversely, a stamp with strong centering, full original gum, no hinge marks, and clean margins can multiply in value several times over. Centering especially plays a big role. Philatelists assign grades based on how evenly the stamp is positioned within its borders. A stamp that's off-center will sell for far less than one that's perfectly framed. This is why getting your stamp professionally graded can be so important. Certification agencies such as the American Philatelic Society or the professional stamp experts can give you an official report that will validate authenticity, grade your stamp's condition, and massively improve your chances of a strong sale. Collectors and investors trust certified stamps more than raw stamps, especially when paying top dollar. Now let's examine market demand. Right now in 2025, stamp collecting is experiencing a quiet resurgence. Thanks to digital marketplaces, international trading, and rising interest in historical assets, rare stamps are once again being seen as solid investments. The Roosevelt D mint mark stamp has begun to feature in top 10 lists of undervalued historical stamps from investment blogs and philatelic websites. This has led to increased competition and higher selling prices at both public and private auctions. Collectors from the United States, Canada, the UK, and even Asia are beginning to seek out these kinds of rare mint-marked presidential issues. If you're holding one, even unknowingly, you are sitting on a valuable piece of the market's current interest. And this interest isn't just from hobbyists, it includes investors who buy graded stamps in the same way others buy rare coins, comics, or banknotes. So what should you do if you believe you have one of these Roosevelt 5-cent stamps with a D mint mark? First, protect it. Avoid touching it with bare hands, use stamp tongs or tweezers. Place it in an acid-free mount and store it away from light, heat, and humidity. Next, photograph it clearly, especially focusing on the area where you believe the D mark exists. Compare it with authenticated examples online, or share it in trusted collector forums to get feedback. If it still looks promising, send it in for certification. Even if it costs a small fee, the potential return could be enormous. You may also consider reaching out to a local stamp dealer or museum with experience in early U.S. postage to help with appraisal. Keep in mind that once authenticated, your Roosevelt D mint stamp will become not only a valuable asset but also a piece of American history that few others in the world possess. Next up, the story behind the 5-cent Roosevelt stamp. We now delve even deeper into what truly sets this stamp apart as more than just a tribute to a great American president. When you look beyond the iconic engraved portrait and the strong serif lettering that wraps around the borders, what you're really seeing is a reflection of American progress at the beginning of the 20th century. This was an era of steam locomotives, expanding industrialization, the rise of national parks, and an America that was forging its identity on the world stage. President Theodore Roosevelt, who is the subject of this remarkable stamp, was not only a war hero and a skilled politician, but also a visionary reformer whose policies shaped the modern presidency. By choosing to honor him on a 5-cent postage stamp, a value often associated with overseas letters and heavier domestic mail, the U.S. Post Office was acknowledging his international influence and his larger-than-life presence in American consciousness. This deeper historical significance only adds to the prestige and desirability of this stamp among collectors who are drawn not just to the visuals and paper, but to the stories, legacies, and meanings that such stamps carry. And it is that very story, layered with subtle visual changes, printing oddities, and rare mint marks like the elusive D, that makes this issue one of the most important stamps to watch in today's ever-evolving philatelic market. Now let's revisit the real-world implications for stamp owners, collectors, and enthusiasts who may unknowingly possess one of these hidden gems. If you're someone who inherited a collection from a parent or grandparent, or perhaps purchased an old album from a second-hand shop, you may be holding a Roosevelt 5-cent stamp that carries significantly more value than you ever imagined. It's crucial to recognize that the Roosevelt stamp is deceptively common on the surface. It exists in large numbers in its standard, non-mint mark form. However, as we've discussed, it's those few rare variants, with the D-mint mark, or deep shade ink, or off-center printing, or even backprint impressions, that catapult this stamp from a simple collectible to a high-demand historical artifact. And because so many of these rarer copies were printed in limited runs, distributed regionally, or overlooked due to their subtle differences, the chance of finding one today, especially in unexamined private collections, is still very real. We're not talking about fantasy treasure hunts here. We're talking about actual documented sales, recent private appraisals, and verified auction results that prove time and again that the Roosevelt 5-cent D-mint stamp is a high-value target for serious collectors in 2025 and beyond. What makes all of this even more exciting is the rising global interest in philately as a form of historical preservation and alternative investment. While some may assume stamp collecting is a hobby of the past, in truth, the collectible stamp market has gained steady momentum in recent years as collectors from the UK, the United States, Canada, Germany, Japan, and many parts of the Middle East and Asia are once again embracing vintage stamps as tangible pieces of history. Investors, too, are entering the picture, people who understand that unlike digital assets or volatile stocks, a physical stamp in top condition with historical and monetary rarity holds enduring value. Auction houses are reporting year-on-year increases in sale prices of rare 19th and early 20th century issues, particularly those featuring prominent figures like Roosevelt. Even more so if they carry regional mint marks, color variations, or rare plate positions. In some cases, the Roosevelt 5-cent stamp has been found with double impressions, color shifts, inverted watermarks, or even partial ghost images, errors that elevate their value exponentially. These are not easy to detect and may require ultraviolet light, watermark detectors, or comparison with verified reference sheets, but once discovered, they are known to bring in four-figure returns depending on overall condition. Let's talk again about grading. Because a stamp's value is not fixed. Two copies of the same Roosevelt 5-cent D-mint stamp can vary dramatically in price based on a few factors. 1. How well it is centered. 2. Whether it still has its original gum on the back, especially if it's unhinged. 3. Whether it has any tears, fins, or creases. And 4. How clean its perforations are. The best example is a perfectly centered D-mint Roosevelt stamp with bright ink, untouched gum, and no faults whatsoever. This is what's known in the trade as a superb XFNH example, meaning extra fine, never hinged. A stamp like this is museum-worthy and could realistically sell for over $1,000 if marketed correctly, graded professionally, and authenticated by one of the major expertising services. On the other hand, a D-mint stamp that's heavily cancelled, badly off-center, or creased may only fetch 1/10 of that amount. This is why condition matters so much in today's market. And because only a small fraction of these D-mint stamps exist in mint condition, they carry even more weight when one is found intact. We should also consider the mounting evidence that the D-mint mark, unlike some other overprints, may have been part of a secret or test batch issued either to a specialized post office region or printed under experimental conditions. This theory is supported by the inconsistency in where the D appears, sometimes faint, sometimes bold, sometimes closer to the design, sometimes offset in the margin. If true, this would mean the D-mint stamp is not just rare, it may be one of the few surviving examples of a forgotten chapter in American stamp production history. This makes it even more collectible for those who focus on postal history, rather than just visuals or catalog number collections. And let's not forget, no major national registry has a full count of how many of these D-mint Roosevelt stamps exist today. That uncertainty, combined with steadily growing demand, makes this a prime candidate for significant value appreciation over the next 5 to 10 years. As we start to wrap up this section of the video, let me speak directly to collectors and viewers out there who might be wondering what to do next. The first and most important step is to check your Roosevelt stamps. Examine every one. Take out the magnifying glass. Scan the details. Photograph them. Flip them over. Study the gum. Check the alignment. Search for any oddities, because hidden among what you may think are just old stamps could be something truly rare. Don't assume anything. Don't dismiss a Roosevelt stamp just because it looks like others. And if you do find something that looks like a mint mark, especially a D, take immediate steps to preserve it. Place it in a protective mount, avoid touching it, and consult with experts. Post in forums. Email a philatelic foundation. Send it in for grading if you're serious about maximizing its worth. And remember, selling a rare stamp in a hurry may lead to you accepting less than half its real value. Take time. Do your homework. Present your stamp to the right audience at the right time. Because that single piece of perforated paper may be your link to the fascinating world of hidden history, and possibly even a small fortune. Next up, the legacy of Eleanor Roosevelt, immortalized through her 5-cent violet stamp, reaches far beyond the borders of the United States and into the global consciousness of what leadership, empathy, and human rights advocacy can look like. As First Lady from 1933 to 1945, she redefined the role of a political spouse, transforming it from a ceremonial figurehead into a dynamic platform for societal change. When collectors examine the Eleanor Roosevelt 5-cent stamp issued in 1963, they are not merely collecting a piece of paper, they are holding a tribute to a woman who sat at the intersection of politics, diplomacy, journalism, and humanitarianism. What makes this stamp uniquely powerful is the fact that it doesn't just commemorate a figure, it captures a movement, an era, and a vision of progress. Eleanor Roosevelt was the first U.S. delegate to the United Nations and was instrumental in drafting the Universal Declaration of Human Rights in 1948. Her voice resonated with both the powerful and the powerless. And when the United States Postal Service issued this beautiful purple-tone stamp, they weren't just printing postage, they were telling the world that her legacy mattered, that her impact was enduring, and that she belonged in the pantheon of American greatness alongside presidents and generals. The design of the stamp itself is worth closer analysis. Unlike many other commemorative stamps of the time, which featured more formal or somber profiles, the Eleanor Roosevelt stamp presents her smiling, a rare and welcome departure in mid-century portraiture. The warmth of her expression is complemented by the elegant typeface used in the inscription, which boldly states, Eleanor Roosevelt, above, 5 cents U.S. postage. This deliberate artistic choice serves to reflect the optimism and humanity that defined her approach to leadership. The background is deeply textured, and the overall engraving style has a softness that contrasts beautifully with the harder, more industrial lines of presidential stamps from earlier decades. In the hands of a skilled collector or designer, this stamp becomes more than just a tribute, it becomes an anchor piece in thematic collections that explore social justice, women's history, and 20th-century diplomacy. It is often paired in collections with stamps featuring the United Nations, peace conferences, and international aid programs. And yet, despite its thematic richness, this stamp remains accessible to beginners, creating an ideal entry point for those who are just discovering philately through meaningful historical figures. Now let's explore the real-world implications of owning, identifying, and properly valuing this stamp. While the Eleanor Roosevelt stamp was printed in the tens of millions, scarcity is only one component of value. Historical relevance, collector demand, condition, and presentation can all elevate a stamp's worth. A stamp that is perfectly centered with full gum, unhinged, and crisp in color can command several times more than an average used copy. And when this stamp appears on original first-day covers, especially with cancellation from Hyde Park, New York, where Eleanor lived, it becomes far more valuable. First-day covers with artistic cachets, custom envelopes, or historical documentation often fetch prices from $15 to over $100 depending on condition and design. One such rare envelope, addressed to a UN delegate and bearing Eleanor's 5 cents issue, recently sold at auction for $185 because of its dual significance in both philately and diplomacy. Furthermore, this stamp has occasionally appeared in error forms, such as double impressions, shifted images, or even inverts, though extremely rare. Any such error should be immediately submitted to a professional grading service, as authenticated printing flaws can dramatically increase a stamp's value and visibility within the collector community. Beyond the price, this stamp serves another vital role in the world of collecting, education. Schools, museums, and social history projects frequently include the Eleanor Roosevelt stamp in displays that highlight women's roles in shaping the 20th century. Teachers use it to spark discussion, while curators use it to connect broader themes across exhibits. Its presence in international collections is also notable, as Eleanor Roosevelt remains one of the few American first ladies to be globally recognized. This international respect contributes to the sustained demand for the stamp, particularly among collectors in Europe, Japan, Canada, and Latin America. In fact, several philatelic exhibitions in the last decade have featured her stamp as part of panels on global leadership and humanitarian icons. If you possess a mint sheet, plate block, or well-preserved cover, your stamp is not just a collectible, it's a conversation piece, an exhibit element, and possibly even a published item in thematic collections or books. From a personal collector's perspective, this stamp carries unique emotional weight. Many collectors who were alive during Eleanor Roosevelt's lifetime describe a sense of personal connection when they add this issue to their album. It recalls a time of letters, radios, and the power of the written word. It reminds us of her newspaper column, My Day, which reached millions and gave voice to the voiceless in a time when communication was restricted to paper and pen. Today, in the digital age, the tactile nature of this stamp, the soft matte surface, the inked engraving, the fine perforations, feels almost sacred. It brings us back to a slower, more thoughtful world where stamps carried not just packages and letters, but ideas, philosophies, and values. In this sense, the Eleanor Roosevelt 5-cent stamp is more than paper, it's a legacy preserved in purple ink. For those curating a Roosevelt-themed collection, placing this stamp alongside the Theodore Roosevelt 5-cent stamps we explored earlier creates a compelling dual narrative, one of rugged individualism and one of humanitarian diplomacy. These two stamps, so different in color, tone, and design, tell the complete story of a family that shaped not just American politics but global humanitarian policy. When displayed side by side in an album or frame, they invite viewers to reflect on contrasts, boldness versus compassion, action versus dialogue, leadership in war versus leadership in peace. And together, they become a compelling set that appeals to collectors of all levels. If you already own either stamp, I encourage you to complete the pair. And if you've never considered thematic collecting, now may be the time to start building a focused Roosevelt collection that includes these and related issues from the United Nations, Red Cross, and civil rights movements. Looking ahead, I believe the Eleanor Roosevelt 5-cent stamp will only grow in both historical and educational importance. As more collectors, educators, and institutions seek to tell inclusive and socially relevant stories, this stamp will continue to find its way into exhibits, textbooks, and digital collections. In fact, several modern stamp designers have cited the 1963 Eleanor Roosevelt issue as an inspiration for newer commemorative issues focused on global changemakers. And that means renewed attention, higher demand, and more value for pristine examples of the original. If you have one in your collection, now is the time to examine it, preserve it carefully, and perhaps even consider professional certification if it appears in top condition. You may be surprised how many people are looking for it, not just collectors, but teachers, curators, and historians who recognize its quiet, yet powerful, message. Thank you once again for staying with me on this incredibly meaningful journey through the Roosevelt stamp legacy here on Stamps Old World UK. From the deep blue ink of Theodore Roosevelt's rugged portrait to the radiant purple tribute of Eleanor Roosevelt's enduring smile, we have explored how two stamps from different eras can connect across generations through paper, ink, and history. These are more than postage, they are portraits of leadership, moments in time, and tangible representations of values that shape the modern world. If this video has inspired you, educated you, or helped you rediscover a stamp in your collection, please consider subscribing to our channel, leaving a like, and sharing your own stories in the comments below. And don't miss our next deep dive, where we'll explore the Queen Elizabeth II 2P light blue definitive, the 3.5p red Mackin, and the hidden varieties and mint mark secrets that make those stamps just as fascinating and potentially valuable as the Roosevelt issues we've examined here. Until then, keep your albums close, your eyes sharp, and always remember, every stamp has a story, and you might be the one to tell it.